Okay, now we know what a MAC address is and how to change it. What we want to do now is write a Python program or script that will do this for us automatically. Now I know you're thinking right now that you don't know anything about Python. How are you going to write a program that will do this? Now, like I said, learning programming can get boring if you don't have a purpose. That's why I want to teach this course by example. So we're going to start programming from the start, and as we program, I'm going to teach you programming concepts and how to program in general. So this is the first proper programming lecture that we're doing, but we're actually going to build a very simple script that will change the MAC address for us. Now, from what you know so far, all you have to do to change the MAC address is run these commands. So if you want to write a program that does this, the first thing that you need to do is be able to execute Linux commands through that program. We want our program to be able to execute terminal commands the same way that we are executing them here by typing the commands manually. Now, anything that you can think of, there is probably a way to do it in Python, or there is probably a Python module that does that. So in order to execute system commands, we have a module called subprocess in Python. Now, subprocess can execute any system commands. It doesn't have to be Linux commands. The difference is, if you run the script from Windows, it'll allow you to execute Windows commands. If you run the script from Mac, it'll allow you to execute Mac commands. If you run it from Linux, it'll allow you to run Linux commands. Now, since we're running our script from Linux, then we can run the commands that we learned in the previous lecture and be able to change our MAC address through a Python program. Now, using the module is very simple, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But before I show you how to use it, I want to show you the module page. Now, for every Python module, there is a documentation. The documentation talks about what the module does, the functions included in this module, and how to use any of these functions and examples, and even good practices and things to avoid. So it's a very good idea to learn how to go over the documentation and learn what modules do, because there is no course online or anywhere that covers Python completely. There is no way someone can cover everything. So all we can do is cover Python for hacking, for example, or Python for data processing, or even maybe a general Python course, but there is no way to cover everything. So you need to get into the habit of reading and experimenting and learning how modules work. Once you get comfortable with using a number of modules, using others is very easy, and you'd be able to just read over the documentation and figure out how to use the modules. Now, we obviously don't expect you to know this right now, but by the end of the course, it should be very easy for you. So, the module that we want to use is called subprocess, and like I said, this module allows us to run system commands. Now, each module contains a number of functions that do something similar. For example, the subprocess module, the one that we want to use, contains a number of functions, all of which allow us to run system commands, but in different ways. For example, some of them will run commands in the background, some of them will run commands in the foreground and wait for the command to finish executing, and so on. The function that we want to use today is called call. So the module name is subprocess and the function is called call. This function allows us to run system commands, but it runs the command in the foreground. It doesn't run it in the background, it doesn't run it in a different thread, and it waits for the command to finish executing before it moves to the next line. This is very important because we don't want our script to exit or continue doing other stuff while it's still trying to change my MAC address. I want it to change the MAC address, finish changing it, and then do other stuff. So that's why we're using the call, because it will not execute anything else until the command that I give it finishes executing. Now, if we scroll down, you can see that there is two ways of using this function. We're going to use the second way in here, and then we're going to go and use the first one in a different lecture and talk about the differences. So, for the second way in here, I also have the example here. All you have to do is just type subprocess.call followed by the command that you want to run, followed by shell equals true. So it's very, very simple. Now let's have a very simple example of the subprocess module before we actually use it to change the MAC address, just to see how the module works. So I'm just gonna go to my Kali machine, and I have my PyCharm in here, and I have already created a project called MacChanger. So I'm just gonna create a new file, and I'm creating a Python file, and I'm gonna call it macchanger.py. Okay, I'm gonna add the shebang at the top. And then the first thing that I need to do is import the subprocess module. So I'm gonna have to say import subprocess. So this literally tells Python that I want to use the subprocess module, import all the functions that I can use with this module. Once I do that, I'm going to use the module by doing subprocess. So this is the module name, and then I'm gonna put a dot. And you can see as soon as I put the dot, PyCharm automatically shows me all the functions that I can use with this module. So these are similar to the functions that you see in here. Now, like I said, the one that I want to use is called call. And again, as you can see, as soon as I type call, it shows me the arguments or the inputs that this function takes. So I'm going to hit enter to select this function, and it'll autofill the brackets for me, and it's going to give me a description on how to use this module. Now I know how to use it, so I'm just going to move my character to the middle. And in here, we're going to put our command between two quotation marks. So this is a very simple example. So all we're going to do is just run ifconfig. Now we know ifconfig shows us the interfaces that are available to our current operating system. And finally, we're going to put a comma and add the shell argument. And we're going to set that to true so that we can run shell commands through this function. And that's it. Our code is done. So as you can see, it's a very, very simple code. And all it's going to do is it's going to import the subprocess module first. Then we're using the subprocess module and we're adding .call. And this is the same way with all modules. You put the module name first, followed by the function that you want to use that's stored in this module. So we're using the call function, and we're giving it the first argument as the command that we want to execute. And in our case right now, we want to run ifconfig. And secondly, we're giving it the second argument, which sets the shell variable to true, so we can run Linux commands through this function. Now you can see that PyCharm is telling me that there is something wrong with this. And what's wrong in here is that shell should be a small s, not a capital S. And this is fine right now. Now I'm going to save this by doing Control S. And then we're going to run it. You can run it from terminal, or you can just go to run and run. And we're going to select this script, which is MacChanger. And as you can see now, the script got executed in here, and it just listed for me the result of ifconfig. So you can see that it executed ifconfig for me. And then we see all the interfaces that are available to the current operating system. So this is a very simple example. I just wanted to show you how to import a module and run a very simple system command. And then in the next lecture, this is going to make more sense because we're going to use it to write a script that will change the MAC address for us.